Recording. Matthew has finally succeeded in training me after 6 weeks. Hey guys, we made it. It's the last day of class. I'm really proud of you guys for sticking it out. This is not the way I figured this semester was going to go, but we made the best of it. All right, first, does anybody have any questions about the exam? Hello, Rob. All right, good. Does that mean you guys are almost done with the exam? Charlotte looks confident.
Yeah, very confident.
Good, glad to hear it. All right, well then, moving right along, let's talk about the neoclassical cost of capital model. All right, so what we said last class is that there are two threads in the literature on investment expenditures. And the first thread looks at demand, and the second thread looks at the cost of investment. The one that takes this ladder to the extreme case is the neoclassical cost of capital model, which was created by Robert Hall and Dale Jorgensen in the early 1960s. I believe it was 1963 when they came out with their first paper. Okay, now, what does neoclassical mean? When you hear it as part of an economic theory or an economic model, that is actually code for something. What is it code for?
Is it like a classical model that was then revamped and made modernized?
You would think that, but that is not exactly what it means. What it means is it's code for micro. Neoclassical means a microeconomic approach. Sid, you made it. Awesome. Sorry to wake you up so early.
Oh, no worries.
Good. Good, good. All right, so neoclassical means microeconomic orientation. So for those of you who took intermediate micro, maybe you got to the demand for labor or labor market analysis. I used to when I taught the course. What Hall and Jorgensen said is, imagine that the demand for capital is exactly analogous to the demand for labor, right? So with a labor demand curve is a downward sloping function of the number of people employed. The labor demand curve is called the value of the marginal product of labor or the marginal revenue product of labor. That equals either the price of the marginal revenue times the marginal physical product, right? So the idea here is that workers are valuable to the firm because of the productivity that they bring, and more precisely because of the value, the additional revenues that productivity brings to the firm. So Hall and Jorgensen said, imagine that the demand for capital is exactly like that, okay? So there is a downward sloping demand for capital curve, which we can think of as the value of the marginal product or the marginal revenue product, exactly like we think about labor. Okay, there is a rental on capital, and the rental is like the wage rate. So given the rental, the firm decides how much capital it wants to employ. Okay, now I'm going to come back to that slide in a minute, but first I want to jump over to the whiteboard, our last chance. Sid is especially looking forward to the opportunity to see my awful drawing on the whiteboard. All right. This is particularly addressed to you. Let's see, black. To you folks either who have taken or are in, but for not much longer, Econ 303, intermediate micro. All right. Do you guys remember isoquants? Isoquants, labor, and up here, capital. Does anybody remember isoquants? Did you study those in micro? Anybody? Taya, you took micro. Do you remember isoquants?
I definitely remember the term. I'm
Okay.
trying to remember which thing that is.
Okay, let me show you, and hopefully it will make sense. All right, I think we want a curve. Okay, an isoquant looks like an indifference curve. An isoquant shows all the different combinations of labor and capital that will produce the same quantity of output. Okay, so for example, this curve might show all the combinations of labor and capital that correspond to 17 units of output, right? ISO means the same, quant means quantity of output. You may not have learned that the other name, the original name for an indifference curve is an ISO utility curve, different combinations of goods and services that give the consumer the same utility. Okay, so the idea here is that there are many different ways to produce the product. Some are more labor intensive, some are more capital intensive. And then the question that's posed in micro is, if the firm wants to minimize its cost, then what is the right combination of labor and capital to use? Or to put it a little differently, what is the optimal capital labor ratio? Okay. Taya, is this bringing back any memories? I'm going to take that as a no. Okay. So the idea here is that just like a consumer budget line, we can draw things that are called ISO cost lines. An ISO cost line is all the different combinations of labor and capital that cost the firm the same amount of money. Okay, so the further out you go, imagine that that's parallel, the more cost to the firm. The further in you go, the less cost to the firm, right? And you won't be surprised if you've had micro to realize that the ideal capital labor ratio is going to be at a tangency here, a tangency to our cost curve, our isoquant. Okay, so imagine that that is a tangency right there. Okay. That tangency tells us two things. It says this is how much labor we want to use, L1, and this is how much capital we want to use, K1. if our goal is to produce Q equals 17 at the lowest possible cost. Okay. Does everybody understand what we're doing so far? And I admit, for a macro class, we are kind of infringing on micro here. Okay. Now, what determines this point? Well, a key determinant of that point is the slope of the ISO cost line. Just like the slope of a budget line is a key determinant of the consumer equilibrium point. Okay. Does anyone remember what the slope of an ISO cost line is? Does anyone remember what the slope of a budget line is for a consumer? Boy, micro really sank in with you guys. The slope of a budget line is the ratio of P2 to P1, where whatever's on the vertical axis is the second good, and whatever's on the vertical axis or horizontal axis is the first good. Okay, so the slope of the ISO cost line is analogous. It's going to be the rental on capital divided by the wage rate. So W, whoopsie, that didn't work. Text, red, we'll go red. No. Rental divided by wage rate. Okay, so this outcome, L1, is the same outcome that you would get from, let me go back, is the same outcome that you would get here if this was the wage rate and labor, okay? So the difference between the diagram that I just showed you and this diagram is the previous diagram simultaneously solves for the amount of labor and capital that the firm is going to want to hire. In this case, what you see now is a partial equilibrium analysis. But the point that I was trying to make here is the rental on capital is exactly analogous to the wage rate when you do this calculation. And if you remember the diagram I just showed on the whiteboard from your micro class, that's the same thing that we're talking about here. Okay, any questions before we bring it back to macro? Okay, now there is one complication here. Probably Hall and Jorgensen would call it an innovation, not a complication, a feature, not a bug. What Hall and Jorgensen said is, we're going to assume that firms hire capital services the same way they hire labor services, okay? If you think about this as a labor demand curve, what employers are actually doing is they're renting your time. They're renting labor hours or labor services. They're not buying you, they're renting your time, okay? And so that's not a stretch. The stretch here is Hall and Jorgensen say, even though in the real world businesses tend to buy the machines and then use the machines, we're going to pretend that they're renting the machines perhaps to themselves, because that's the easiest way to understand the true cost of capital services. Okay, so let me interpret this specific graph for you. On the horizontal is KS, which is capital services, which is like capital hours, the number of hours that you run the machine. Just like labor is really labor services, the number of hours you work on the job. So what this graph is going to tell us is how many capital services the firm will need if it wants to maximize its profit. Okay? And the answer to that question is they're going to need to know what is this thing on the horizontal, on the vertical axis, which goes by a number of different names. You can think of it as the rental. You can think of it as the cost of capital, though strictly speaking, it's the cost of capital services. Or you can think of it as PKS, which stands for price of capital services. So the price is on the vertical axis, the quantity is on the horizontal axis. Okay, so the challenge with this model is to understand what is this rental thing? What is the cost of capital? Okay, and that's where we're going to go next. All right, I'm going to give you the answer and then we're going to walk through it. Okay. So what Hall and Jorgensen asked is they posed the question, what would it cost a firm to rent a machine for an hour, a day, a week, or a year? What would it cost a firm to rent a machine? Let's give a specific example. Suppose, let's see, who can I pick on? I don't know. Sid, are you feeling the love today or no?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Sid decides he's going to start his own business over the summer. It's a well-known business. It's college students moving company. Okay. So you're going to hire 6 of your closest friends who all happen to be rugby players because they're strong that way. Okay. And what are you going to need to complete the business?
Moving trucks?
You need a truck. Yeah, you need something to carry the furniture in, right? So I'm going to guess that you don't have a spare $100,000 in cash laying around. So instead, what you're going to do is you're going to rent trucks from Ryder Truck Rental. Okay, that minimizes your risk. Okay, it takes your capital and turns it into essentially a variable cost rather than a fixed cost. Okay, so we can ask the question, what does Ryder charge for the use of their truck? Okay, how do they figure that out? Well, the answer is it depends on a handful of factors. Okay, the first is the price of the truck. In the slide here, it says PKS depends on PK, the price of the capital asset itself. Okay, now suppose the truck costs $100,000. Sid doesn't have that kind of money. So what's Sid gonna do?
Take
Charlotte?
out a loan?
Yeah, you go to the bank and you say, I need to borrow $100,000. And they say, who the heck are you? No, they wouldn't say that. Well, they probably would say that. So we're gonna skip that little part of the story about risk and that sort of thing. And we're gonna say, okay, they agreed to lend you the money. Okay, maybe they're gonna charge 10% or something. So you take the $100,000 loan, you buy the truck, you use the truck for a year, And then you sell the truck in the secondary market and you repeat, right? Just like Hertz and Avis use their cars for a limited period of time and then they sell them, so does Ryder Truck Rental. That way, the trucks that people rent are in fairly good condition. Okay. Now, there's another cost that we haven't mentioned yet that Ryder incurs, and that cost is depreciation. What does depreciation mean? If you're a business major, you're likely to give me the wrong answer. I'm sorry, I interrupted somebody.
I was just saying, like, going down in value.
Okay, why does a truck go down in value? Why does a piece of capital go down in value?
Because it's been used.
Okay, say some more.
Like a new car driving off the lot loses a bunch of its value.
Okay, well, yes and no. Okay, what we really care about here is the true economic value of the asset. Okay, not the accounting value or even the market value for that matter. What we care, when you drive a car off the lot, you're not really losing any value in a real sense, right? Admittedly, if you try to sell the car at that point, you won't be able to get your money's worth out of it. But that is a failure of the market. That's not actually reflecting the fact that the transportation provided by the car has gone down by 40% just by driving it off the lot, right? So if you own the asset, what you care about is the actual economic depreciation, the wear and tear on the vehicle in this case. And by using a capital asset for a year, you do put some wear and tear on it, okay? So that assuming that the resale market were perfect, if you tried to sell it after a year, you wouldn't get 100% value because it's not worth 100%. It's worth, some fraction of 100%. Depreciation is a real cost of owning an asset. So we need to count that as part of our story. And the way we typically do that is by looking at depreciation rates. If you go to the fixed asset tables at the BEA, they calculate depreciation rates on all kinds of capital assets. It's pretty amazing the detail that goes in there. Okay. I'm sure Ryder Truck Rental can tell you how much depreciation their trucks experience during a year, say. Okay, now it's going to get complicated. The next factor that matters here is called revaluation or capital gains. Okay, so Hall and Jorgensen tell a story here. They say, let's suppose your truck is a Mercedes. Yes, they do make trucks. And Mercedes hold their value really well. Okay, so you use the truck for a year and you resell the truck and you get 100% of your purchase price back. This is a hypothesis, okay? So you sell it for PK. What do you do with that money? Charlotte, what do you do with that money?
Can you repeat the question one more time, please?
Okay, the question is, you bought the truck last year, you used it for a year, you sell the truck this year, and you get the full purchase price back. So you got lucky. So what do you do with the money? It's not a trick question.
You buy something else?
That's a good answer. But what we're going to say is you use that money to pay back your loan. You see? You borrowed $100,000 to buy the truck. You use the truck. You sell the truck. You get $100,000. You take that money, you pay back the loan. And when the dust settles, all it's cost you is the financing cost. And I might add the depreciation, but that's a separate issue, so we're not going to worry about that. Okay. What I'm saying here is this is kind of like the best possible scenario. You use the truck for a year, and all it really cost you was the financing plus the depreciation. There is some wear and tear, and you had to maintain the truck, repair it, and stuff like that. Okay, in which case, this component of the cost of capital drops out because there is no capital gain, there is no capital loss. It's a total, it's a net zero. All right. Usually, however, what happens when you try to resell your asset after a year?
You don't get the full money back.
You don't get the full money back. So you take what you got back and then you use it to pay off the loan, plus you have to come up with the difference, right? Suppose you suffered a capital loss, which is normally what happens. Then the difference between the capital loss and your purchase price is an additional cost of using the capital for the year. That's why it's included in here. It's really easy to confuse depreciation with a capital loss. They are distinct things. Depreciation is the wear and tear on the machine. Capital loss is something different. Capital loss is a reflection of the current market value of an equivalent machine. Okay. Think about housing prices. They tend to rise from year to year.
Could you repeat that again?
Yeah. Okay. Depreciation is different from a capital loss. Okay. Depreciation, suppose you need to maintain your truck and you follow the maintenance schedule and it is perfectly well maintained. When you resell the truck, you still won't get 100% of the value for it, right? And the reason why is because it doesn't have as much life left in it. That's depreciation, okay? But suppose we did the following. You buy the truck, you put it in a garage, you never use it all year round, all year long, and then at the end of the year, you sell the truck. How much has it depreciated?
Technically, I mean,
It hasn't depreciated at all because it hasn't been used. And yet when you try to sell it, you won't get 100% of the purchase price back because current prices are higher than they were probably when you bought the truck.
So it's the difference between the capital that you have and the price that it will go for in the market.
Yes. So let me say it a little bit differently. Depreciation is specific to your truck. Capital gains or loss is a reflection of the used truck market in general. They're not exactly the same thing. But the bottom line is, if you resell your truck and you sell it back at a capital loss, that's an additional cost that you're going to have to incorporate when you calculate what is it costing me to use the truck for a year. And then the final element is taxes.
Thank you.
Okay. So you use the truck in your business, the business generates revenues, hopefully it generates a profit, you're going to owe a corporate income tax if you're incorporated, or a personal income tax if you're not incorporated, right? So ideally, we want to incorporate the taxes that you pay in the price of capital services. Okay, now let me put some numbers in here and see if this will help you make more sense out of this. Okay, suppose the PK is $100,000. Suppose the interest rate is 10%. Let's suppose the depreciation rate, we'll call it D, is 3%. And let's suppose that the percent change in PK, switch the font here, is 5%. And suppose your average tax rate is 7%. And what we're defining taxes as a percentage of the value of the asset. Okay, and the reason why is because what this allows us to do is say PKS equals PK times I plus D minus revaluation plus T. Okay, instead of revaluation, let's just call it capital gain. Capital gain. Okay, now the PK is $100,000. The interest rate is 10%. The depreciation rate is 3%. Sorry. The capital gain is a minus 5%. That was what you lost when you resold the truck. And then you had to pay a tax rate at 7% of the value of the machine, right? So what did it cost to use the truck for the year? Well, it cost 10, 13, 18, 25%.
Don't we subtract the 5%?
No, because it was a capital loss, not a capital gain. So we did a minus.
Gotcha.
Okay. So what does that work out to? $25,000, I believe, right? The fractions all add up to 25. 10, 25 times 100. So with these numbers, it cost Ryder $25,000 to own the truck. So in this case, $25,000 would be the price of capital services, or the user cost of capital. Now, any questions about that? Notice that these variables here are all things that the firm would have access to. Okay, now, since we're talking about truck rental, probably we would want to add insurance in there, right? Insurance against loss. So that would be another element. We probably also have to consider the fact that the truck wouldn't be rented for 365 days a year. right? So if we wanted a daily rental, we would divide this by 365, or rather by the average number of days per year that a truck is rented. Ryder absolutely knows that information because they have a track record of renting the trucks. So suppose it's rented every other day, then 365 divided by 2 is 365. 365 times 2 is, pulling out my calculator because I can't do that math. 365 times 2 equals 730 divided by 25 is, that doesn't sound right to me.
Don't we divide by 2? 'Cause it's
Yeah,
like-
I think you're right.
yeah, it should be like 180, 180
Yeah.
something.
Okay, so 365 divided by 2 equals times 25 equals $4,500 a day. That sounds a little crazy. I probably did my math wrong, but this is conceptually how you go about figuring it out. Maybe I've got my decimal in the wrong place. Let's see.
Aren't you supposed to divide the 25K by the 180?
Yeah, and I am,
Okay.
because this is the 180. So 25 divided by 180.
I thought you said the 180 times 25. I misheard you.
I may have misspoken. Let's see, 25,000 divided by 180 is, oh, here, that's much better. It's about 140 bucks a day rental. Now that makes more sense. This would be a very large truck for $100,000. Okay, now to go back to this graph, now that we know what the rental is, that tells us how much capital, how many capital services that we want to buy. And then the punchline, there's two punchlines here. One is most companies buy the truck and use it themselves. And so the price of capital services would be just what we figured out a minute ago. The more capital services they need, the more trucks they have to buy. So figuring out KS0 is equivalent to figuring out the number, the amount of capital K we need. If we need more capital than we currently have, that is investment, and that's where investment comes from. Okay, so you look at this model and you say, what causes investment? Well, a decrease in the cost of capital would cause a need for more capital, or an increase in demand for capital that shifts the whole curve out would cause an increase in investment demand. All right, any questions?
I've got a question about the US sort of used car market there. So sellers of used cars have to pay capital gains tax and sales tax on the sales of their cars.
Okay. Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Other questions? All right. Well, then there's just one more thing I want to show you. In case any of you want a little more extra credit. Did that wake you up? Okay. I have an end of class survey. It shouldn't take you more than 10 minutes to do. It's on a Google form. I sent out an announcement earlier today that also has the link. If you could do that, I'd really appreciate it. I won't look at these responses until after I turn grades in. But I will look at, the last question is give me your name so that I can give you credit. So I'll simply look at the last name, the last column, so that I can see who to give credit to. I would really appreciate it if you took the survey. It really shouldn't take you very long.
Just thought I'd let you know one of the questions that should be a short answer actually just says option 1 as a multiple choice.
Yeah, let me fix that. Thank you. I'm glad somebody is paying attention.
It's question 3 for reference. I noticed it this morning too.
All right. Back. Question 1, question 2, question 3. Oh, 3A. Yeah. All right. Paragraph. Done. All right. Thank you, everybody. And thank you seriously for sticking with this class. I didn't know what we were in for. Maybe you can say the same thing. Okay, as I said before, I will be available this weekend if you have questions about the exam, and I will be available next week. So shoot me an email and we can get together and I can help you. So.
For the final, will you be just emailing us the results and the grade like you've been doing for the homeworks?
If you want your grade on the final, send me an email. Mm-hmm. Usually by the time grades get in, teachers are totally exhausted. And we don't think about stuff like reaching out to you guys. But if you want to know, send me an email and I will respond. Any other questions? Thank you very much, you guys. You've taught me a lot this semester, and I hope to see you next semester or at some future time. Bye now.
Thank you, Dr. Greenlaw.
Yep.
Thanks,
Thank you for everything, Dr. Greenlaw. Take care.
Professor,
You're around.
Hey, Rachel, don't. She left.
She's gone.
Professor?
Yes.
Sorry, I have one more question about that
Sure.
prerequisite form. So I got everything filled in except the place where you initial, and there's no box for your initial. Is it okay if I leave?
Yeah. I mean, there is a box. Hold on. Let me pull that up and see if I can do it myself, maybe.
Okay.
All right, let's see. I know I have it. All right. Nope, that's the wrong one. All right.
Hello.
Oh, I see. Yeah. Okay, fill and sign you. Do you have Adobe Acrobat?
Me?
No. Sorry, Chester.
I do not.
Okay, I can do this. It's letting me do it, so I will forward this to you in a minute, okay?
Okay.
And hopefully it will all take. All right, save, and I'll talk to you in a minute, or I'll send this to you in a minute. Thanks,
All right.
Chester. Yep,
Yeah, thanks for all the help with this.
of course, glad to have you. So Rachel,
Mm-hmm.
your demeanor is totally different today.
Yes. I'm very distracted.
Huh?
I'm distracted today.
I know. No. I meant that in a good way. You are positively glowing as opposed to, what you've looked like over the last few weeks. So good job, Joey.
I did something.
You did something without even doing anything.
I needed a little bit of normalcy to be able to focus at all for my finals.
Yes.
So having someone that's normally around.
So do you have any end date, or are you just indefinitely relocated to South Carolina?
My sister's not letting me leave until I am safe to go home.
Yes.
And so that is either like campus opens back up in the fall or New York reopens.
Mhm.
Because right now to travel through New York,
Yeah.
like I would essentially have to stop there or in Jersey, which is also
Couldn't you like rent a boat or something?
also not safe.
Huh?
I feel like that's also not safe.
But Rhode Island is on the water, right? So you could bypass New Jersey and New York.
Yeah, if I tried.
Okay.
That hard.
So
Yeah.
wow. So she's not going to let you leave. I like that.
Well, she works at the hospital.
I know.
And
I know.
So
I know.
for me to go anywhere is to potentially give them anything that
Sure,
she's
absolutely. So how are you going to be quarantined after you leave her?
Well, wherever I go, I'll just quarantine myself for 14 days.
Okay.
If I'm in a house with other people.
Then will you have to quarantine yourself again when you leave them, or if?
Technically, that's what you're supposed to do.
No, I get that, but no, I was thinking if you like went to Joey's house.
Yeah.
And quarantined there, that would be probably more fun.
Well, one of the reasons that he is here is because my sister wanted me to quarantine for 14 days here if I was going to go visit him.
Okay.
But he's technically been quarantined.
Yes.
This whole time because he's literally not left his house.
Yeah. So she sounds very responsible.
Yeah, it's annoying.
But now you don't have to worry about that anymore.
Yes.
So good job. I was amused to look at your grades. So Rachel, you beat him out in one area.
Not surprised.
And then he beat you out in the other area.
That does surprise me.
Okay.
Which one? What'd you beat me in? Because I got a better grade on you than the midterm.
Hold on now. Hold on. Let me see. I probably shouldn't be having this conversation because you'll just get mad at me. All right. Okay. So his homework grade is slightly higher than yours, but your class participation grade is higher than his.
Shocker.
Yeah,
Because I'm not going to name names here, but one of you talks more than the other.
Really?
Is that a fair statement?
Yeah.
Yeah. Good. It's kind of like you are a good combination together. Yes. And then there was one other thing I was going to make fun of you about, since I can. Oh yes. Okay, Joey, get ready in case she faints. Okay, get ready to grab her. All right. Rachel, the good news is, you know what your average is right now?
A B.
Your average is 1.85.
1.85. What does that mean?
No, we
Well,
shouldn't.
2.0 is a C.
I'm lost.
1.885 means C minus.
What? Okay.
Isn't that disturbing?
Yes.
Okay, so,
Yeah.
okay. That's counting your final exam as a 0.
That's funny.
That's just mean. You've
No.
got a little faith in me?
No,
It's a
yes,
good-
and that's why I did it.
Okay.
But the reason why I actually calculate these things is it makes it easier to do final grades if I set the whole spreadsheet up to just continuously calculate.
Mhm.
So, you know, if we wanted to be fair, I could tell you what Joey's current grade is, but only if he gives permission.
I give permission.
You have a 155.
Ho ho.
So that's a lower C at the moment. You're 5/100ths above a D plus. But
0 on the final.
yeah, so you guys can just skip the final and you'll pass.
Yeah.
So,
But if we do good on the final,
you know, I think you guys should get a little competitive here. I'm going to give one of you the gold star.
You'll win.
I'm much more competitive.
It's okay. All right. Have a great weekend. And
Thank you.
You too.
Let me know
Thank
if, seriously, let me know if you have questions about the final.
Yes, sir.
I think of this as kind of a dialogue kind of final.
Mhm.
See what you can come up with. All right. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Yeah.